Hello, Labor YouTube channel. My name is Rafael Grohmann. I am an assistant professor of media studies at the University of Toronto. And now we will have an amazing and big conversation with this special people we will introduce to you. With me in the moderation of this session, Madison Trusolino, postdoctoral fellow in English at Dalhousie University and alumna at the University of Toronto. Madison just got a PhD here in information at the University of Toronto, so congrats, Madison. And today, Madison and I will host a conversation on the lessons and next steps and the future and present and past of writers and actors strikes, the Hollywood strikes with Writers Guild of America and Screen Actor Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. You have here Kate Tibaldi from WGA, director and producer, Monique Alvarez, Justin Carter and Victoria Pollack from both WGA and SAG-AFTRA. So thank you for having us, and thank you the audience too. Feel free to introduce yourself through the chat, and after you can do your own questions for this amazing lineup we have now. So please, I will ask Katie to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your background and how um, you get in touch in with organizing and so on. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for having us. Hi, everybody. My name's Katie Tibaldi. I'm born and raised in Michigan, and then I've lived in New York for quite a while since I went to film school at NYU for undergrad and graduate school, specializing in film and television writing as well as film directing. And yeah, I've been an activist, I'd say, since early. My parents are both educators, so they have that in common with you guys, and coaches. So I definitely grew up in a family where, education and speaking for others who were, not being thought of or taken care of was something that was a core value in my house. So, yeah, my mom's also a groundbreaking coach in women's athletics. She's in the Michigan and National Hall of Fame for coaching. So I had a really strong example of, a feminist mother, which was amazing, as well as father. My dad is a principal, but also one of her coaches, assistant coaches, which not every man might be up for. So, yeah, I would say it started from an early age. I used to act like my fellow WGA strikers, don't anymore, but always was acting and writing from a young age and doing journalism as well, which I continue to do. So, yeah, I primarily write for comedy half hour television, but I've also worked on drama and television variety. And also direct and produce. And yeah, I've worked on hundreds of episodes of television over the years and produced several feature films. Been a Sundance Institute fellow, and WGA Strike Unite came together during the very beginning of the writer's strike. All of us Writers Guild members, and then my other fellow three co-founders also in SAG, and we just saw a great need for um, you know education and empowering membership and helping make the change we wanted to see, not just with the strikes but in our industry in general. And that's definitely something we're really passionate about continuing to move forward. So yeah, that's kind of me. Currently I'm working on the television series Harlem. It's a half-hour series on Amazon. Also was part of the main creative team on the Emmy-winning show At Home with Amy Sedaris, and produced a feature documentary Street Fighting Man that you can find on Amazon, Ovid TV, lots of places, that was distributed by First Run Features. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm glad to join the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Katie. And you, Victoria, introduce
Hi.
yourself, please. Hello.
I would say similar to Katie, grew up with I grew up in an environment where to be of service is to be a functioning human. My grandmother was very involved with local politics, so I went to my first Supreme Court rally when I was before I could walk-ish, and that kind of continued throughout my life. I went to Barnard in New York City, part of Columbia University, for my undergrad, studying all the things, working with folks who were had totally divergent interests. I then got my master's in fine arts at Juilliard for acting. And in the time after school, I always knew that I was really an actor producer. I like getting things done. I hate seeing energy go and good ideas go to waste. So the producer part of me, I then started writing, and that led to me producing a reading of stuff that I had written, and then helped me get into TV, where I started as a showrunner's assistant to Warren Light on Law and Order SVU for a few years. And that was the best crash course in how to make a long-running show before, through, and sort of after peak pandemic times. And that I've continued writing from there. And as the strikes hit, one of the things that led to all of us coming together was Monique and I wound up taking the mic at one of the earliest meetings. And I asked the question, hey, we're a union of 11,500 people, and we have hundreds of millions of viewers or people who like to consume and be a part of our work. How are we empowering them to join us in this? So how do we make it not just about those of us who are members of, and how do we make this a broader conversation? And that's how Monique and I connected, and then how we connected with Katie and Justin, and how all of us had a like-minded sense of purpose. So that's a little bit about how we got to now.
Thank you, Victoria. Justin, hello. Nice to meet you. Justin, are you there?
Hey, sorry, I got a bit of a delay, but my name is Justin Carter. I'm here. I'm sorry, I got a bit of a delay. So my apologies for that. My name is Justin Carter. I'm an actor, writer, director, producer. Similar to the other folks on the team, I started my journey in this industry pretty early on. And I went to Morehouse, and at Morehouse, I did a lot of producing and writing little film projects throughout the city of Atlanta. I interned at some television studios and did a lot of hustling, and that's what really taught me how to get stuff up on its feet from the ground level. Then I went to LA, and I connected with a brilliant man named Bill Duke, legendary writer, actor, director, producer, and he agreed to be my mentor. And he's somebody who really stressed the importance of having another pot to go to when something runs dry. So always keep something cooking is the mentality that he really impressed upon me, and that's something that I took and ran with. So if I'm not acting, then I'm writing or directing or producing something. I'm a SAG-AFTRA member. I'm a WGA member. I'm a playwright. I've sold plays and put plays up on their feet. And I've actually also been an organizer. I've been involved in organizing different labor movements in New York City. So, you know, it's just a really incredible time to be in this business during what is a global labor movement. It's something that I think that folks really underestimated the power of folks in our industry and the impact that we could have on the labor movement. And I think that they underestimate us at their own peril, as you see from the different strikes that we've won. So I'm going to kick it to Monique, I guess.
Hello. So honored to be with you guys. I am one of the 4 WGA Strike Unite core group. So proud to be aligned with these individuals who have just, you know, it's like they said, like when you're in a tough time and you kind of band together, not only have we gotten through this strike together, but I have just been really inspired by and moved by what we've been able to accomplish as a group in approaching this labor movement over the last almost 7 months, right? We just ratified the SAG-AFTRA contract yesterday. It has been a spirit of how do we celebrate each other's voices? How do we amplify our diverse voices and celebrate the diversity that is all of us in this labor movement across all of the unions in the entertainment industry? And here in New York City, it was incredible to see union members from every kind of sector, from garment workers to, automobile, people that worked in auto factories, across the line, retail. Um, and it's just been really inspiring. So first, I just want to thank you guys for having this conversation, because when we look back at unionism, and how that looks so different today, it was such a hard, long fought, hard fought, long fight, for our early advocates, that fought in the labor movement. And I feel like there's a bit of a feeling today, at least I have the feeling, that a lot of our younger folks, a lot of our younger generations don't quite know the role a union can play in their professional life. A lot of older generations, even my dad, I had to remind him of the importance of being a part of a union, as my grandfather was. And my grandmother, when she immigrated from Cuba to New York City, she worked in a garment factory. I remember a lot of the garment factories. I remember one caught on fire and everybody in it died. So then that's an early part of a labor movement, for protections, for rights, for representation, and for our voices as artists nowadays to not only be heard, and not only matter, but to have certain safeguards. And so we have found those safeguards now in solidarity. So thank you for having this conversation. My name's Monique Alvarez, Monique Nicole Alvarez. I think I'm going to switch it up after this strike. Moment of reinvention. I'm a first generation Cuban Colombian American born in Miami, Florida, to a Colombian mother. I found out later in life Spanish was actually my first language. Didn't know that, because I stopped speaking it, relearned it. So I packed my bags. I'll fast forward. I came about being an actor, writer, producer at the age of when I was a kid. I loved putting on plays, like a lot of us did that ended up in this industry, putting on the little family shows. And I remember writing plays when I was a kid and performing those plays, little one acts, in middle school. So the first time I saw my writing up on a stage was with my classmates and my peers. So I got that bug early on. I came to acting through improvisation, being an improv actor, doing regional theater, and always writing, and always writing every day. Fast forward to growing up in Miami, Florida State University. I have a background in film, communications, media production, and Hispanic marketing. Packed my bags when I was about 22 years old and made the trek across the coast to live the dream in Los Angeles, California, where back then, pre-Me Too movement, um, self-tapes weren't really even a thing yet. And it was just about getting an audition to get in the room and to be off book before you got in the room. And you had that one take with the casting director. And, if you got an adjustment, woohoo, you celebrate that and you take the adjustment. A lot of that person-to-person human contact is kind of on the line, has been on the line the last few years. Seems like everything is self-tape. So I just mentioned that, and I suppose we're having a conversation in the here and now. That was over 15 years ago. Yeah, I miss the human person-to-person connection of it. So I can't wait to get back on set next year. As an actor, I've had several roles from on camera in the film Percy, starring Christopher Walken, to voice. I'm a voice in Paw Patrol, to coming up cast in 0 Days, starring Robert De Niro. As a producer, I had a background building a production company. I ran a production company that I co-founded in Los Angeles for about 8 years, produced from music videos to commercials, feature-length documentary, and animated projects. And writing, I most recently am the executive producer, co-creator of the television series titled, for the purposes of, I guess, not getting bleeped, it's Hialeah Dade effing beep County. that we sold to Amazon Studios, and so excited that we got to shoot a pilot in Puerto Rico. And we have the first and second scripts, which we are very excited to take back out to market come the new year, post-strike in the new world, and find our series a new home. It is a Cuban-American dramatic family comedy. After kind of I guess I took advice early on, which is the advice I would just come out the gate saying to people, is the advice that was given to me. I remember, when anytime I would see a notable director in LA, which is, you run into people all the time, say, what advice would you give me? Everybody always said, do your work. Just do your work and keep doing your work. Don't ask for permission to do your work. Don't wait for the perfect circumstance to do your work. Just keep telling your stories and learn by doing. And I took that advice. So I guess making over a dozen short films as part of my film school is what kind of propelled me to say, what story can I tell that is unique to my life, to me? So my first pilot, my first TV show that I sold is going back to my original roots, where I grew up in the city of Hialeah, Florida. And so I would just say, do what's passionate to you. And nowadays, being a hyphenate is it's wearing different hats. We kind of are, in an age where it's kind of great to wear different hats. Everyone here seems to be like, from writer to director to producer. I just directed my first independent pilot for a docuseries I'm developing. It's just like, do your work. And one of the best things that I learned along the last decade, 2 decades in this business is the power of collaboration, where it's so much easier to do something with each other, especially when you're getting it off the ground, than doing it alone. And so in the beginning of this, as Victoria said, when we formed WGA Strike Unite, it was with, how can we get our story out there? And it was about coming together with our different perspectives to tell the strike story, which came from the voices of the different people on the picket lines, and what people had to say, and how we were encouraging each other and bringing light to issues that maybe hadn't been talked about yet. So where we go from here, I'm excited to continue the conversation, specifically around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I love Toronto. I love the Toronto scene. We spend a lot of time there. My husband, Clark Johnson, who's also a director, actor, writer, who directed my pilot, and has worked so much in Toronto, raised his kids there. It's a creative place. I love the diversity of Toronto. I love all the different walks of life people take to get there and to share. So that's, glad to be here.
Oh, thank you, Monique. Who knows, next time we will meet in person here in Toronto or there. I'd like to know more and learn more about the lessons you learned with the strikes this year. But I will pass the ball to Madison to do the first question. Feel free to introduce yourself to Madison.
Thanks, Rafael. So my name's Madison Trusolino. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Dalhousie University with a PhD from the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto. And my research is primarily on informal and formal labor organizing in the arts and cultural industries, with a specific focus on the impact it has on marginalized creators. So thank you all so much for that amazing introduction. It's so lovely to be here and get to know all of you. And one of the things, that struck me when the strike started, and I was following it very carefully, was how I've always thought of labor organizing as a creative process, and strikes as a creative process as well. And so here we have, folks who are creative, who are creatives, and who are now labor organizing. And I was wondering if you can speak to how your own creative practices helped your ability to organize effectively and to garner public support, which you did in droves.
Wow, 1,000%. I mean,
as folks have mentioned so far, like the joy of being a collaborator, a part of what you learn by being in our business is you can't do anything alone. It takes a village to make anything, whether you're filming for one day on a TV show or making, you're an auteur making a massive film project. You need the community. So our collective talents in terms of, producing and therefore organizing and coming up with a calendar and a schedule and doing the data analysis and research to figure out when was the best time to post, using our collective videography editing skills to capture people, just human to human, being able to talk with fellow members on the picket lines and talk about like, how's it going for you? Or being attuned to the moment, as so much of our artistic training lends us to, so that as we see something happening, whether it's, an artist who's like a musician who's come and is raising the crowds, and then somebody who's giving a stump speech, that's just deeply inspiring. I think that our training in terms of being responsive to the moment, and then our specific areas of technical expertise from producing and going nuts and bolts to thinking big, like we would have blue sky conversations similar to what a writer's room might have at the very beginning of a TV project, to talk about what is this? What are people feeling? How can we respond to the needs of our community or public concern at this moment and be nimble and not get stuck or cornered into one idea of what we're doing. So I think there's a lot that was implicit in our creative paths, both as practitioners and trainees of, and all from different sources. That what you said, it is a creative pursuit. There is no one way to do it. There are so many things to respond to. So I think that all of our individual strengths, we got to combine forces, and that was a joy, even though the strike was really, really hard.
I would say Victoria was she was like, we each worked as a team, and kind of, if we had different buckets, it was like our video bucket, Justin and I were really focused on the the filming and the execution and editing of all of our video. But the majority of them, Victoria and Katie, with their producing skills, were just so attuned to the facts and being in tune to what was the conversation of the day, or the insecurities of the day, or the questions of the conversation across social media, which was a big place where this campaign was executed. They would really, the value of just providing information and reflecting back information created a place for people to engage. Continuing that dialogue, anytime people would comment and people would rapid fire questions, and Katie, who would very much manage our social media channels, was just there, always being in tune with what people's concerns were that day, which was a really big inspiration for the Sunday Solidarity brunch food drive that Katie, it was her vision that she got. Justin, Victoria, and myself really excited to let's make this happen. Let's do this with Joelle Garfinkel out of LA, who single-handedly is a woman who raised over $250,000 in grocery gift cards, 100% of the proceeds going to entertainment workers in need. So it's like, here we were, us with the support of our unions, WGA East, and sponsors and donors, like almost 800 people came. So the power of organizing, the power of like, how did we put our creative talents, energies, and skills, was kind of like, well, what's needed? And each person kind of focusing on the hat. I probably interviewed almost 100 people myself along these picket lines. Justin has edited, his computer's probably smoking. And Victoria has probably looked at more facts and stats than I think people even knew existed. And Katie has engaged and had conversations with hundreds and hundreds of people every day. This was like a full-time job sometimes, at least a part-time one. And it was really worth it. And we all grew from it. And it was really inspiring. And just to find passion in like, and also discovering, well, what am I most passionate about here? And people were like, oh my God, I was feeling that same thing. Like, thank you for putting that graph. I feel concerned about that topic too. Or thank you for sharing those facts. No one's talking about that. Let's talk about it. And so we also normalized having dialogue.
Yeah, and I think understanding too the power of storytelling and how passion for the stories you want to tell, as well as what you're passionate about in life, the various aspects of activism that we all have had from early ages that we carry with us, the same way that we carry our creative passions with us, really go hand in hand. And we're for people who, want to tell all kinds of stories, but stories that have meaning. And, I like I said, I do a lot of comedy, but comedy can also be a great way to cut through to truth, right? Like I definitely have regularly some people confuse, like, you make documentaries, but you also do comedy, but you also do this. And it's like they want to put you in one box. And to me, my response is always, and I think all of us feel this way, that it's really just about storytelling. Documentaries, a different kind of storytelling, comedy, drama, like they go hand in hand. And I think it's the same with, like, how can we use what we're passionate about to build solidarity and engage other members? And it was really important to us to activate with all unions, but also non-union workers, who we hope will join us in union soon, because we've been those people as well. And there's such power in community and solidarity. And, like, for example, WGA Strike Unite was really important for us because within the Writers Guild of America, there's Writers Guild East, there's Writers Guild West. We really wanted to build bridges countrywide. And also we've connected with a lot of unions internationally all the time, daily on social media, which has been really amazing as well, to help each other, because we're all in the same fight. What's happening with media here in the US there's exploitation happening worldwide, as we know. So building a bridge during the strikes early on, us becoming a reliable source for people with information and inspiration really connected us. Victoria and I were both also strike captains, and we were able to really engage with the strike captain community to help get our message out as well. But also, just like, I could tell you the captains at every gate in LA, just that we met through our social media, Joelle being one of them, with Green Envelope Grocery Aid, and then how we're able to use our resources by coming together to do building solidarity and union power and fighting for inclusion and things that are really important to us far beyond the strikes, but also to call out, like, I'm reading sometimes thousands of messages a day of literally, hearing stories from people and what they're going through. So, for example, like Monique said, with the Sunday Solidarity Brunch, it's like, as the strikes went on, a lot more things were happening in LA because there's just a huge contingency of unions in LA, but we weren't necessarily seeing the same kind of food support in New York beyond our basic all the time food banks. And so it was like, okay, when are we going to see that here? And when we weren't seeing it, it was like, well, let's make it happen. And, then it was like, well, the writer's strike is ending, and SAG, like, is really now the time. Should we wait for IATSE strike? And it's like, no. Every day we're hearing about the great need. And like my fellow co-founders have said, seeing that on the picket lines that we all saw on a regular basis, hearing it on social media, having people reach out directly to us. And we've connected with so many different unions. And I know from our strikes helped inspire other unions to fight for what we deserve and what we want for the future. So I think that, the passion and, like the multi-hyphenate aspect, you bring that to your activism too. So you have to, like, find the ways to connect with people in a variety of ways, be that video, information, education, community events. That's a big thing too, even just on our socials, to say, hey, this group of Black screenwriters is getting together this Friday. If you're in LA, you should come, like all these different things that are happening. That's just sometimes hard to find, not get overwhelmed of following so many different things to find information. And so that's something that we definitely are passionate about continuing. But I do think really the passion that you find for yourself creatively, I think exists in activism too. It can be hard sometimes. Like Victoria said, the strikes are really, really difficult, and a lot of us will be recovering from them for a long time. But also we've had amazing solidarity that we need to continue to grow and push for the change that we want to continue to see. Well, I think you're muted, Justin.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh.
There it is.
Sorry about that. I just want to echo everything that Katie said. The creativity is how we won. the multi-hyphenate aspect that all of us bring to the table, that's how we functioned as such an effective collective. And it's so funny. Katie was mentioning, people kind of, oh, well, how are you a documentarian, but you also do comedy and you also do this and you also do that. I've had similar experiences. I remember when I was selected one of NBC's writers on The Verge, and I had a decision to make. Like, would I take this Netflix gig that was a pretty high profile acting opportunity, or would I go and try to pursue my career in writing? I chose to pursue the writing. And I remember being at NBC and like trying to like hide the fact that I was that I was an actor, and then at some point I was outed like in a movie in a meeting with executives, and I felt like, oh, like, don't, please don't think any less of me because I do multiple things. But this time around during the strike action, I think we kind of saw all of that crumble, and it was like, no, this is a huge advantage. If you can do multiple things, this is how we win. This is how we come together and rely on all the totality of our skill sets in order to get our message through. We were able to cut through with our messaging because of the different talents that we all bring to the table. The reason why we were able to put together the Sunday Solidarity Brunch and serve 800 people is because we didn't approach it like we were just writers or just directors or just producers. Like, we brought all of it to the table, and that is how we were so effective in accomplishing our goals. And I think that it's such an important lesson to learn as we see the labor movement take fire globally. It's like, don't think of yourself as just a worker. Think about everything that you embody and bringing that to the table in order to accomplish your goals within that specific labor movement. And then there's no way you won't win. There's no way.
Great.
Thank you so much. And congrats on having also probably the most memeable strike in history.
Yeah, and you folks did like the biggest strike in the industry through like 40 years or something, and this is really important. I'm from Brazil, and in my research with media workers in Brazil, one of the findings is, okay, I am not a worker, or I'm not part of labor movement because I am an artist or I am an intellectual, and I cannot be part of. I don't want to be part of a collective organizing. So the challenges are harder at some point. And I have to say that even in Brazil, the strikers in the U.S., the strikes in the U.S. resonate a lot in terms of, we can be inspired by this like solidarity movement or this organizing movement. And obviously there are many challenges. I would like to say that there's a question from the audience from Maxime Harvey. Maxime is from Montreal. A lot has been said about digital technologies, from platforms to AI. How can we turn to the use of digital technologies around empower unionization, strike organization, and creative practices? I will add, or maybe focus a little bit the question on the issue of AI. Most like newspapers or even like you yourself are saying, okay, maybe the agreement around artificial intelligence was the first one in like many sectors in the world of work. And I would like to know from you, what were the discussions and bargaining around AI, and how this type of agreement, or how was the internal discussions around this agreement around AI?
I think that's a very interesting question. I honestly, I would be very curious to hear of what the person posing the question, what they think the answer would be. The answer is in the question kind of thing. I think it's something we're all navigating, and it's territory that needs to be more regulated. And so that has been a great part of this strike.
Yes, and what the WGA did, which was historic, we were the first really in terms of saying, here are the guardrails for this thing. Now, was it everything we wanted? No, but because this is such a new frontier, we're going to learn a lot how to do a lot of this as we go. But the incredible opportunity that we had as a union was to set the precedent. And the precedent was set in terms of defining that a writer is a human and defining what we can pull, what studios can draw upon when they ask us for work, and what they do with our work and what they do to our work. So I'm really proud that the union stood tall on a lot of those things. They were very difficult, very complex issues, but they were able to navigate it pretty well in order to keep us protected. In terms of the question that was posed, listen, this is a lot that we are going to have to tackle in the days and the weeks, the months, the years ahead. I'm not sure if you folks heard about this in Canada, but you know, Sports Illustrated recently got popped for having entirely AI generated articles. There's something going on where people are trying to feel out, okay, how do we navigate this minefield? And I think that what we are going to have to do as artists in this industry is we're going to have to take hold of the AI so that we can use it as a tool, right? Because I feel like if we don't start to learn and understand how to utilize it as a tool, what's going to happen is the studios, the major entities, the publishers, they're going to start to weaponize it as a tool to use against artists. As you see what just happened with Sports Illustrated. And they're not the only ones. There are other folks that are using AI to generate content that should go to a human being, someone should be paid and fairly compensated for. So we're going to have to figure out ways in which we say, you know what, that's not acceptable, but you know what is acceptable? Using AI in order to cut my research time down by like 80%, so that then I can turn around and write and generate the articles for the publication. It's like but if we completely throw our hands up at it, they're going to use it, and they're going to use it to, you know, further marginalize us.
I think it's sort of, my response to the question is sort of twofold, because I think we also have to take into account AI versus generative AI, much in the same way that we can talk about social media as, from a nuts and bolts perspective, as far as facilitating a movement, like social media was how we were able to get the message out to so many people. And we used Canva to create slides, and we used editing software. So in terms of digital technology and technology at its broadest sense of tools that advance us as people forward, I mean, we were totally dependent and used them daily to do what we do, which was ultimately to inspire the masses to participate in our strike conversation. So I think there's sort of the lane of, it is a tool that can help us do in the doing of striking or unionizing. So there's that tactical part. I think philosophically, it's when we look at the origins of unions in general, where you have a lot of unions began, for lack of a better term, in blue collar, physical labor based environments, where you have there's a physical offering which equals a paycheck at the end of the week. And I think what we're seeing now with artificial intelligence and generative AI, that what were previously thought safe jobs, as far as computer-based jobs, white collar, we're at this fascinating turning point where more people actually need more labor protections, because there's both the power for the tool aspect and the power to be replaced by. So I think we're at this fascinating part, and the reality is the technology is developing so quickly that we're playing catch up in terms of how it will affect us. I think back to when I first started college. This is back in 2008. I'm dating myself, but there was my first anthropology class. One of the books we read was The Breakup 2.0, and it was an anthro professor who had asked her first-year college students, what's the worst way you've been broken up with? And everybody writes down their answers. And at the time, the big, like, clutch your pearls moment was how many people had been broken up with via change in Facebook status, which was the new technology at the time, where it's like, oh, I got dumped because they're now single and I thought I was in a relationship with. But the whole nature of this study really lent itself to, we have so many emerging technologies, and our pace as humans at adapting to those technologies, those are out of sync. So I think all of us around the world are in this wild negotiation with technology. The rate at which these massively impactful technologies are being developed outpace our ability to create social norms about them. And then, you know, when we turn to the governing aspect, it's like, okay, we're just now seeing an Instagram rule on hitting the floor of Congress, and that's been around for a decade. Like, it will have to be a person-to-person participation, and we will have to walk that line of using tools that help us keep pace, and hope to work with.
Yeah, to tail end off of that too, like educating people about how fast AI is changing and growing. Just during the beginning of the strike to current day, it's changed enormously. Like, we've seen that, tracking it on a daily basis through the facts and education we're doing ourselves, but also that we're communicating through WGA Strike Unite. And you know, like at the beginning of the strike, for example, AI was like the very beginning. It was not like a major issue that was being like our main focus. It was like residuals and, you know, streaming and other things. And then, like, as more people learned about the dangers of AI, especially for creative people, and how important it is to have parameters in place, like, I can use AI if I want as a writer, but a script, because AI is stealing from former writers, right? Like, it's stealing from creatives, and they tend to be predominantly like white men as well. So it's setting us back inclusion wise for women, people of color, LGBTQ folks, etc., disabled folks. They are not being used as the models that are pumping out this quote creative information, right? So if we want to use the tool as writers or filmmakers or creatives as humans, that's a conversation you have to negotiate with yourself. For me personally, it's not something I'm very interested in at all, I'll just say. But if anyone wants to, you know, all that's your choice. But to not understand, like we've shared even with graphics that we've made and videos that we've made, you know, there is nothing that can replicate the human experience. Losing someone, giving birth, having great, you know, joyful moments, like AI cannot replicate that. And it is stealing from people's experiences to pump that out. So we're very, very proud that in particular, the Writers Guild has defined what a writer is, which is a human, what a showrunner is, which is a human. And that can help protect us. And also that we're opening education for people to understand. Like, one of the quotes we've shared, you know, from an expert on AI is like 50% of white collar jobs could be eliminated in the very near future. And if you just think about it on a small scale, taking, for example, what's happened in grocery stores with cashiers being eliminated, which I personally hate, because I'm always the person getting stuck at the machine where it's like, you've rung it up wrong, and then I'm having to wait 10 minutes because there's not enough humans working to come and, you know, correct it with the machine. I do see it encouraging that some grocery stores are actually feeling that information being given to them, and they're hiring more people. But for example, I was at one recently where I truly waited 15 minutes to have someone come and correct something that had scanned wrong. And I asked her, because there were about 20 open lanes. It was a large grocery store, and there was only 2 with humans. And I asked her, like, you know, why aren't more people working the real lanes? There's now 20 here that are machines, but we keep getting people slowed down because they're having to wait, and there's only one of you working to, you know, come and say, okay, you can keep scanning. And she just simply said, yeah, they just won't. We'd love to be back on the cash register. They just won't pay for that. They want 1 or 2 of us working this area, and then as few as possible at the registers. But that in itself, when that came about, you know, we didn't really question it. We just thought, oh, this is great. I can get through faster and I'll just do it myself. But that eliminated jobs, good jobs for people. It eliminated face-to-face. And it actually, in many ways, made it not easier, made it harder. So They're things you constantly have to be trying to get ahead of. I say playing offense on AI versus defense is key, because just like in political movements or other activist movements, you need to be thinking ahead, because these companies, as we've seen, companies like Netflix and all the studios, Amazon, they're hiring AI experts to eliminate our jobs, and that just is happening. That's a real reality.
Yeah.
So the thing that we have on our side is getting ahead of it, understanding and making sure regulation happens. Like Victoria said, we'd love to see more government regulation with it. But since we don't have currently any government regulation hardly on social media, and social media, as we know, is enormously powerful in this world, we've seen it with our own movement and with our own strikes. We have to keep on the government, but we ourselves as individuals and as movements have to be, regardless of what they do, making sure we get parameters for ourselves. And unions are hugely helpful for that, to make that happen, because we're collective action that can then help inspire other unions to say, yeah, you know what? I'm not putting up with this, and I'm not letting my jobs just be eliminated. Look what's happening to journalists right now. As some of us, Monique and I both worked in journalism a lot as well. You see people, I don't want information from non-humans telling me what the news is or what people are going through and experiencing. I want to hear that, just like when I'm fact checking a documentary or sourcing stories, you always need to have at least 3 to 5 things that you're double checking all your facts, right? Well, if you think AI is going to be doing that, where's that information coming from? Again, look at the group where that information is being taken or stolen from, versus, hey, this is a person I talked to on the picket line directly who's sharing their story with me that I can then use to educate others or tell my own story.
We were so proud in the telling of these stories, because a lot of the stories, it's like we take it's on the picket lines. It was a process of discovery and hearing what other people's points of views are, and it was also a very structured conversation, and all of us knowing what was on the line, literally what was on the table in the negotiations. So there was a unified conversation with a lot of different perspectives. I'm proud to say that while we did use software, I love Premiere Pro to edit, we did not at all once use an artificial intelligence generated content. Like, I didn't allow any auto edits. Like, every single reel, to my knowledge, that I executed was all chosen. The timing, the music, everything was definitely us using the tool of software, but putting our emotions and my God, editing it, it's such an important process. And you need the computer, you need software. You can't edit without it, unless like we're doing film and we're going back and we're going to cut it and tape it and all of that stuff. But if we're working digital, then we, it is our friend, just not to replace us with. I'm going back to to Katie's point. Also, the Directors Guild of America defined a director as a human. That it was such a huge win. That Supreme Court ruling, a writer must be a human intellectual of source material, stemming to a human being, is everything, because our life experience and our soul and our spirit and the blood in our veins, like, this is our source material. And isn't all of this a pursuit of connectivity, to connect with one another, to share our experiences? And it so involves our emotional lives. And so, going back to the question, it makes me think that some of the answer to that question of how do we use digital technologies to further the conversation of labor organizing and of the regulation of artificial intelligence. And I feel, both as an observer and experientially, that answer is out of the digital processes. It's around us, in our culture, in our shared value system, and in our conversations. Because while we're organizing here, all right, in the US, and we're having this conversation with you in Canada, and then, there was internationally, I remember we had it was like the International Screenwriters Day. I was blown away by how many different people in different countries pre-union were tagging us and organizing with us and mounting protests in solidarity with us, expressing the solidarity came out of their expressing the need to express, we share in these values with you. And so those are the conversations I think that we just need to keep having. So it isn't a, well, then we'll leave this country, we'll leave this, it's regulated here and it's regulated there, so let's go over here where it's unregulated. Let's just take the work out. So we kind of got to be in solidarity globally in a sense. And if there was no pushback and no one had any visceral response to like not watching a human and like knowing that all of the actors you're watching might not be humans, like if they were all just artificial intelligence, or if like everything you're going to be, gathering around the TV with your family to watch at Christmas time, if like it's not the same feel, it's a different feeling when there's like a human behind that, and it's a different experience. Especially when it's represented or reflective of where you come from as an individual. So that's what's at stake. And a lot of those conversations are still have a lot at stake. Like representation of the Latino community in the US, while it's 20%, while Latinos comprise nearly 20% of the US population, you have less than 3% characters, leads on screen, on broadcast, which is not the streamers, but the broadcast. I think 0 Latino leads in 2023. You have less than 1% of directors, less than 1.5% of showrunners, and it's not that there's and this goes for different cultural groups too. So yeah, AI is one part of it, but it's continuing the cultural conversation of what we value. It's a creative process, and what I love about WGA Strike Unite, which was always with the intention of engaging the general public, people that aren't in the entertainment industry, because it affects people across all different industries.
Yeah, and to know we're not alone, and we as humans determine what our future is. As much as tech companies might want to make those decisions for us, actually we make those decisions, and people have the power. And when we come together, we're unstoppable. And Monique mentioning the Screenwriters Everywhere Day, that day literally my phone was melting because we were getting so many tags, shares, sends our way across all of our socials, thousands and thousands. It was one of the most inspiring days of the strike for me personally, and I know for our organization, because it was overwhelming, but also so inspiring to see, because it is all connected, not just as humans, but as the labor movement in general, and certainly with entertainment as well. We see jobs being sent overseas where there aren't unions to protect people. I have a good friend who's a cinematographer that splits between New York and Hong Kong. And, in Hong Kong, he can be asked to work over 24 hours with no stopping, holding a camera for that long. He's literally had jobs there. He's a pretty prolific cinematographer there, where people have had to have a second behind him holding him physically in the event that he passes out from holding the camera. That's a true reality that's happening in places where production's being sent that there aren't unions. And it doesn't mean there aren't amazing and beautiful filmmakers there who, of course, we want to see their work uplifted and given opportunity, but in a protected way. And we're seeing now with, South Korea starting to really push back in their industry, because as we saw with Squid Game and more Korean dramas being picked up by places like Netflix, where especially during the strikes, we need more material. Here's great, really popular material from South Korea that's done very well internationally and is now doing well here. And, I know, for example, the creator of Squid Game saw very little money from that show. And that show is one of Netflix's biggest hits ever in history, on par with Stranger Things, another huge, show for them from the US. And so it's all connected. If we pretend in our own bubble that, let's say, even with the great protections we feel honored to have through the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA and other unions, we think that it doesn't matter because we're protected here. That's so short-sighted, because jobs will be sent overseas where there aren't union protections. And also, we should obviously care about all humans and all creatives, and the power that we have when we come together and stand up and say, we saw from all over the world, truly every continent, maybe except like Antarctica, we had places contacting us, and it really was so inspiring. And to see directly how our movement was also inspiring other countries to say, you know what, yeah, this is wrong, this is not okay, we're tired of this, we need to push back and get better regulations and unions going in our own countries. And that's by us, again, sharing our stories. Because when we share our experiences, everyone learns from that, and it's so important to the greater movement at large.
That was the secret sauce to our success. The solidarity was so powerful because we were able to connect, not just with rank and file, but with fans, with people who enjoy our writing, who enjoy our acting, who enjoy our producing and directing. Monique can tell you there's not a day that we were out there on the picket lines that we didn't run into people who were just there to support us. People who just showed up. I mean, there was this adorable kid who came to the Star Trek Day picket. That's another part of the creativity. We were doing fun stuff like, who doesn't want to show up to a Star Trek Day picket, And this kid must have been like 12, 13 years old. And he was like marching and picketing with us. And we got an interview with him. And he just said he traveled like a very long distance to get there. And I asked him, like, what made you want to come today? And he just said, I'm a huge Trekkie, but even more so than that, I'm sitting home watching everything that's going on with the movement. And he asked himself, how can I contribute to this? How can I help? How can I help get the people who create the work that I love get back to work? And then he got on a bus and rode 2 hours to show up in Times Square to do a Star Trek Day picket. That's so powerful when we can connect with people across the globe in an international way to express and to transmit solidarity in a way that is so palpable that it really frightened the studios. They really did not expect that. They didn't expect there to be 98% approval ratings for all the Hollywood strike actions. And that's what gave our wonderful negotiating committees the leverage to go in there and then say, listen, you want to give us a fair deal, or do you want us to continue to bludgeon you with this solidarity? Because it's not going away. And our solidarity was unprecedented, from union to union, from the file down all the way back up to the fans, everyone. People who have been involved with multiple strike actions over the decades, no one has seen anything like what we enjoyed during this last year. And it was really powerful, and that's why we ended up getting the results that we did.
We're not saying AI is bad. We've been using AI for a long time already to tile a stadium. It was just a conversation, to Justin's point of the negotiation of regulation. That's what we were talking about here, not AI. We're not saying, oh, that's bad, good. No, it's let's regulate it. Let's come to a common ground. Let's come to an understanding. But yeah, putting certain protections in place. And also while we have those unprecedented gains now, because it was an unprecedented conversation as well, writer being a human, we just have to grow these gains. And a lot of that is also in the culture of, when a person's in a showrunner level, they get to really choose whether they're going to have a diverse writer's room, a diverse group of writers, or not. Whether they're going to choose to help somebody work their way up the pipeline, get experience, or not. So we also need to not just, okay, it's not all on the software, on the computer, on artificial intelligence. It's also on the accountability that we have as individuals in this industry, and how we kind of really do, I guess, take ethic responsibility.
Yeah.
Leadership is responsibility, right? I mean, so we need leaders within our own union, and that's every union member. Unions are stronger from their membership. And so it doesn't matter if you're on the negotiating committee or a national board, or you just joined 5 days ago, you're in the union, and it'll be as strong as you put into it. So, there can be doesn't mean that there can't be conversations that can be said are dissentful, but just members expressing concerns or their point of view that might not be being heard or they feel isn't being heard. Every voice is important, and it's important to, especially in a system and countries where sometimes it feels like, it's hard for your voice to be heard, where it doesn't matter, just like with politics, right? If people think, well, it doesn't matter if I vote, or it doesn't matter if I get involved because it's just going to be whatever. I mean, that's exactly what the people in power want you to do. And that's how unions don't thrive, is when you don't have really engaged membership. And we feel like that's one of the very best things that's come from the strike is, a more engaged membership and people taking more ownership of their part in the union and making their voices heard and what their strongest concerns are. And yeah, even seeing it with, we've all been non-union members, so we know what it's like to be, you can be exploited as a union member, but you have your union you can go to for help and protection. When you're not in a union, you can be really exploited because, you're just worried if you say anything that you're going to be fired, especially in an industry like entertainment where so many people want to work in it. And especially if you're coming from a place of not having, connections or money or things that help like extend you maintaining in the business, it can be really scary to say like, hey, this person is making, taking advantage of me or exploiting me or making me feel unsafe. And so unions are so good for building those protections, but we also need the experience of non-union workers who are maybe being exploited even more to know what to look out for. And as leaders within our union, and as we move up in different positions, writers, directors, performers, showrunners, to say like, it's an important thing for me, not just to like, find success in this business or have a voice in this business, but to also like make it better than it was for me. And all four of us feel very strongly about that because we've all had different levels of exploitation we've experienced, unfortunately, and continue to experience just in the nature of the world and, capitalism and all kinds of things that we can be the change, even if it's just a very, what may seem a small thing, you being a person that someone feels comfortable coming to on set to say like, this person is not making me feel safe. I feel unsafe at work. That's a huge thing. It may seem small, but that's a huge thing to that person, right? And there's many examples of that, like Monique saying, like making sure I want a room that has inclusion, and that can be people of color, LGBTQ folks, disabled folks, people from different backgrounds, financially, cultural backgrounds, like all kinds of things that are really important. And a lot of people may have good intentions, but they get busy, especially if you're in a position of power, like a director or a showrunner or a head producer. The reality is it does take more work to make certain things happen. But if it's important to you, you'll make it a priority, right? So as a producer, I may say, I want to see more women. I want to see more people of color. I need disabled folks hired on this show. And that's a priority for me. Even if I get one director who's a woman and a person of color, and that may seem like, okay, well, it's only one, but that's something to start with. It can be a long journey sometimes with these studios to make that happen, because they come in with these lists already from agencies of here's people you should hire, or okay, here are women and people of color who are Emmy, Tony, Oscar winners. And guess what? None of them are available in the time slot that you need. But we tried, we gave you this list. And so now let's go back to this other list that we've gotten from the agency that's primarily white men. Not that there aren't, some great white men, but is your entire season directed by white men? Is your entire room look a certain way? Are you not thinking about the variety of experiences people have, even with issues like class, right? Like, and trauma and all different things that can add to your room. So it really is a responsibility that I think we definitely hope to push more people in power and through our own careers to make the change we want to see, because that's why it takes a perfect example. Ava DuVernay with her show Queen Sugar, every single director was a woman and many of them people of color. That's unprecedented, and it is changing lives and the industry. People who only wrote, for theater, had never written for TV or film. And having a system in place that helps those people succeed by having mentorship on the show, people who are like Julie Dash, very, very acclaimed, woman of color director, mentor these new directors who maybe have only directed theater or short films or whatever, but that show a lot of promise, have a lot of potential, just need to be given the opportunity, right? But also the opportunity to succeed. Because as we know, with people of color, women, etc., I've been in situations where it's like I've helped prep all the directors for a show. And if I'm able to get fighting for a woman and a woman who's a person of color, like everything to make them succeed, because unfortunately a lot of these corporations will use any example of, even if they're fine in comparison to a white man, let's say, if there's any inkling of, well, that wasn't as easy, okay, great, we just don't have to hire any women, we don't have to hire any people of color. I wish it wasn't that way, but that unfortunately is a reality that we come up against on a daily basis. So it's, being intentional with the way that we move through the world and our careers, and recognizing that I'm so inspired by younger generations, of the way that they speak up, the way that they tolerate less abuse, the way that they're motivated to have inclusion across the board just be something that's not constantly being jabbed and have to be fought for. That, of course, we want more people involved. Of course, we want to hear from all different groups and have different stories told. And that inspires me so much. And like Justin said, even fans, we had a group of fans, Our Flag Means Strike, who are fans of the show. Our Flag Means Death, it's a Max show, who raised thousands of dollars to feed us on the picket lines, and who, for the Sunday Solidarity Brunch, gave us, over $500 worth of groceries to give away to entertainment workers, non-union and union. That's amazing. And they did that all on their own. They did that because that's a show that has great representation. People of color, LGBTQ folks feel very, very seen from that show, and the relationships that are focused and fostered on that show. They feel seen in their own life. And so they want to give back through, what can we do to help the people who are making us feel seen in this world, who are making us feel safe and celebrated and joyful and silly. And that is, so to me, like, was such a empowering and inspiring example. And when we approached them, it was like they were doing it in LA, like, hey, would you have any interest of also like helping support in New York? And it was an automatic yes. And what can we do? I mean, they were sending food trucks to LA that cost thousands and thousands of dollars to feed people all day long, and bringing snacks to our picket lines. And not only that, showing up in droves and in costume, inspired by, Our Flag Means Death. Like, that shows the power of media, the power of storytelling, and how it's much bigger than, you can get many things from entertainment, right? Like joy and feeling seen, but also empowerment. I mean, that's a perfect example. And that show is a show that's very fun and silly, but also is really saying something in how they're showcasing the characters, and how they're making people feel seen just by representation. And so to me, like, those are the stories and voices we need to keep giving examples of and showing, because that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we can do. And like, to Justin's point, that does scare the shit out of tech corporations and capitalistic entities, which are just so focused on money. As we've seen with these strikes, we're asking for such a small portion of what corporations are making on a much larger level. And we have to fight for that. And we have to fight for the stories we want to be seen, that we know the audience is for, and that has a much larger impact, far beyond just what we're creating, how it can influence people's lives and inspire them.
Excellent. Whoa, I have so much to say and to comment, but we have 4 questions from the audience. Most of them, maybe you respond a little bit, but I will read the 4 and I'll give the floor for you. And after Madison will do the next question. The first question is from Rafael Tabasnik. How was the impact from the bigger celebrities' point of view on this movement? Do you think most were afraid to speak? How was the adoption in general? I have to say that there was a Brazilian actress, a so famous Brazilian actress in Brazil, who did her first movie in Hollywood, and she could not talk about the movie launch in Brazil because of the strikes. And this was so interesting because she started to talk about the strikes in Brazil to audience that like never was aware about what is a strike in Hollywood. So this may be an interesting part. Second question from Yuan Lin. Hi everyone, thank you so much for this meaningful conversation. How did you all navigate the negotiation process with major executive producers and navigate the power dynamics there? The third one, Katie Ziegler, in their discussion about how we can support IATSE as they head into a contract year. There's some limiting language in the ACT-ACTRA contract, but curious what the talk is among rank and filers in CA. And the final one, Andrea Campos Rocha, there has been a huge hype around AI again and its application in different sectors of cultural production, how this affected your jobs, and what issues around AI you think worthy to address from a labor movement perspective. So more about like bigger celebrities and negotiation process and ACTRA and IATSE. So the floor is yours. Feel free to pick up only one or whatever you.
I think these are all such great questions. I wanted, if it's okay, I wanted to start with the power question, because I think that's central to all of these questions. That a huge part
Great
of starting
question.
a labor. It's so good. The central part for any labor movement is recognizing your power as laborers, whether that's intellectual, whether that's physical, whether that's all of the above, and in combination, that you cannot at any point in a labor movement, whether you're just starting to organize to form a union, whether you are in a union that is considering going on strike, or whether you are unionized and actively on strike, as soon as you lose sight of the value you bring as a laborer, then you've lost any leverage and negotiating power at all. So looking at, and they're negotiations, right? You're going to go back and forth. You have to ask for what you need, if nothing else, to get it into a broader conversation about the current circumstances are either unacceptable, unsustainable, or both. And this is our proposal for how it is tenable for us for the future of our unions. I mean, I think of the UPS workers the full-time workers made like 3.5 times what the lowest paid part-time workers made, and we're able to leverage that. It's like, the end of the day, the labor has the same value to the company. Packages are delivered. It's the argument about, well, it's not enough time or X and Y. It's like, you still have to value what the end product is. The end product is the corporation gets what they want, which is packages delivered. And let's talk about what that's actually worth to them. And they were able to negotiate on that premise. Within the entertainment industries, we had to really embrace the idea that you cannot like begin to make a film or a TV show without someone who's creating the story, especially since you can't copyright AI generated content. So it takes a really long time for people to feel that on the corporate, producer end of things. But we really had to buckle down and hold on to that premise of, we originate the stories, and there is so much value in that. The rest of the system stops if you don't have a script to work off of. So all of the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are directly entertainment worker, that are industry adjacent, from stylists to the coffee shop owners, around the corner from these major studios or production spaces, you have to recognize that power and hold on to it, and be unabashed in respecting yourself and your fellow workers in that relationship. And I think that it's a very personal thing for people to evaluate what that means to them. We all met on the line. So the four of us were, we felt it was very much our responsibility, and we owed it to our duty. We owe it to the nature of storytelling in this country and as a global storytelling machine, that it's really important to us from a premise of humanity that we maintain human participation in story making. When it comes to, celebrities who have fundamentally more visible lives, we're at such a fascinating moment where people's relationship with what power looks like, and how they participate in it, unless they've spoken about it openly, we'll never know exactly why they don't choose to speak. Like, I think of someone like Jessica Chastain, who was very vocal at many red carpet opportunities to bring the strike into the conversation and advocate for her fellow SAG-AFTRA members. I think of the folks.
That was right.
Yeah, well, and I think of folks like Florence Pugh and the cast of like Oppenheimer and Barbie, who just walked off at various points from red carpet events. There are a lot of ways to demonstrate your power. Some folks will argue that withholding your labor is the best way. Other folks will say, you got to shout it from the rooftops, or creative people, let's get more creative in terms of how we mobilize the masses. So on that thread of creativity, I think you have to allow yourself to think of many creative ways to live the values that you hold closest. So we certainly have our celebrities who we admire, who did so very boldly and unabashedly. I think of folks like, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who, like, he wrote a big fat check to SAG-AFTRA Foundation and applied a different kind of social pressure to encourage other people with financial means to participate. He didn't grab the mic and say anything directly to folks, but he participated in an action that led to so many other actions that benefited the community in a time of need. So, and there are hundreds of examples we could give like that. I mean, Stephen Colbert was giving out American Dream, his Ben and Jerry's flavor on the lines in New York in solidarity with his late night writers. I mean,
Drew Carey.
Drew Carey. I mean, it's like we can liberate our imagination in terms of what participation looks like, especially when we're navigating with what seems to be a very hierarchical us versus them, like we won't go into the Edward Said, otherizing parts of it, but we have to constantly challenge the premise so that we can, and challenge the expanse of our creativity to accommodate how we can live our values better.
And using this as an opportunity, because this strike, it's one film director in Toronto, we were having this conversation. She says, what I love about what WGA Strike Unite is up to is, and the community at large, because the whole community, was how you were creating space. It was like using this time frame as an opportunity also to create space for these conversations, and out of what you just left off on, and to defining what our values are. I really admire, like Wanda Sykes used her time marching on the picket lines to talk about the progress that she'd seen had been made from the last strike years ago to now, and how there was greater representation of women. I remember, if I'm quoting her correctly, black and brown faces and LGBTQ, and look at all of these women. She said, we don't want to go backward, we want to go forward. And also the young folks, I think of the students that are just now graduating, and like looking for their entry into the industry, or maybe that PA that graduated and like used the pandemic as an opportunity to like get in on a crew, work their way up as a production assistant. Maybe they're like second AD by the time the strike hit, and then they are out of work, and we don't know what the landscape is going to look like later. So, back to what Victoria was saying about like what we value. Rosie Perez is someone else who used this as an opportunity to kind of say, I'm tired of having the same conversation about Latino representation. I'm tired of talking about it, she said. So while we're tired of talking about certain things, it's been the perfect opportunity to re-engage in that conversation. But this time using the like power of our voices, of our collective voices through this labor movement to kind of say, now let's see some change. Let's not keep talking about the same things now. Let's kind of, it was like, I don't know, like awake. Like before this, it was, well, we don't really want to talk about it. We don't want to stir waves. I don't want to alienate myself. We don't want, but then it became a place of like, it normalized the dialogue. What I loved about what our work was as a collective, WGA Strike Unite, was how much we celebrated those powerful celebrity voices on the picket lines, right beside the power in the voice of a rank and file member. We set out with a very clear vocal intention that we were here to mostly celebrate the voice of the rank and file member collectively. And it was really amazing how the class system kind of disappeared, and everybody on the picket line, whether you were like super famous, super rich, or those 2 students from Orlando, Florida that took a road trip up here, that Victoria, you interviewed, just because they are excited and they have a dream and they want to help, perpetuate a future that's gonna carve out a place for them. That question is still in the air of carving out a place for people, because there are things that we still need to do to carve out places for people. Justin.
I'll take the IATSE question in terms of things that we still need to do. Let's be very clear. The men and women in IATSE, they are our brothers and sisters in solidarity. They were out there on the picket lines with us every day, fighting for us on the SAG end, fighting for us on the WGA end. And yes, we know what the calendar looks like. We know the tasks that they have ahead of them, and we are absolutely with them in solidarity, the same way that they were with us every freaking day on that line. And to that point, Victoria and I are actually part of what we're coining a labor alliance. It's a special group that is working closely with IATSE members in a very, very granular level. We are going into the specific houses all around the country, not just on our coast, to see how we can continue to assist them as they prepare for the action that they have coming over the next few months. We actually did somewhat of a soft launch at our Sunday Solidarity Brunch, had so many fantastic IATSE folks come through, and we were able to connect and discuss next steps so that we can make sure that when their time comes, they have learned from all of the mistakes that we made, and they can apply early on the incredible things that we learned that are positive about how it is that you fight for your rights as a union. They are so receptive. They have such incredible leadership. People who are connecting with the auto workers and figuring out how it is that they were able to win so effectively and so quickly. They're connecting with them so that they can kind of learn those tools and apply them to their action. We're connecting. It's like the solidarity that we found this past year, it's not going anywhere. And we are going to be right there in the trenches fighting with and for IATSE when the time comes.
Yeah, and what we've gained now from then, like when IATSE was up to, vote on whether they were going to strike in the past few years, I was part of that, like helping make graphics for some of the IATSE unions of like getting information about like, do you know that script coordinators and writers assistants and art coordinators aren't being paid a living wage, yet they're, part of a union? That the craft service assistants making $33 an hour, which is amazing, and they should, but that those positions who are helping write and create the shows are being paid less. And a lot of people don't know that information, or you could say like an associate editor is very similar to support staff positions, and yet they're being paid in the $40 per hour in these positions, which were being paid like $15 to $16 an hour, now are being paid, $22, $23 an hour. That's still not remotely a living wage. And often those are positions where people are being exploited a lot. And unfortunately, currently those positions are only in a union in the West Coast, not on the East Coast or Atlanta or other parts of the country. So they can be paid whatever in those cases. So, seeing how it's all connected, right, is a big part of it. And that our fight as a writers guild, as SAG, as IATSE, they all are connected, because as we get better things in our contracts, it helps when you go in. For example, the Directors Guild, when they went in, the WGA had recently gotten paid parental leave into our contracts. And so then they were able to use that to get it into their contracts. And so it is all connected, because once you have it in one, right, it's harder to say like, well, you can't have it, only this group of people can have it. And I'd say similarly, it applies with celebrities or rank and file members. We've had so many celebrities who've shared our information and given generous donations and given generous interviews, and who on a daily basis, if we tag them, will share information. And some of that's through maybe people we've worked through. Most of it is just through people we meet on the line, or who I tag on social media, or who we DM and then share that information. And what's great about that is they help us grow too, because it increases pressure on others who are not doing or saying anything to also have to take an active role or be noted as not by our unions, by fellow members, and who you want to work with, right? And finding your people. So it's like, wow, these people I don't even know are sharing this information because they believe in, I'd also say, connecting it back to storytelling. We've seen examples, whether it's inclusion, or Victoria and I have both worked in support staff a lot. There's a lot that people don't understand about support staff, of how they're being, exploited and helping write things for free and not being paid, and have a lot of valuable experience in a situation that's kind of become a ladder where they're being held down. Sometimes people being support staff now for 15, 20 years, which is just exploited labor to be in those positions that long, because you're not working in those positions that long if you're doing more than assisting. You're helping write for free. You're helping produce for free. You're helping assist directors for free. And we see this within inclusion too, so many different areas that we want to see represented in our rooms, that we want to see making films. When we can get people to understand, like, no, this is the experiences that people are having, of just trying to be heard and seen, just trying to have their stories told, and how that affects others in really direct, specific ways. Like, here's what happened to me. I was asked to work on this Disney show for $10 an hour. Couldn't afford to move across the country being paid $10 an hour because I have lots of student loans. I'm a single person. Don't have a family, like, they love me, but, can't help support me. Like, and you're being told, like, it's really sunny in California. Like, me sharing those details of why I have to pass on a job that could be career changing for me. But unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to take it, because I can't be paid $10 an hour and be working 90 hours a week.
Which is below minimum wage.
Yes, which is below minimum wage. And, often in those positions, for example, for support staff, many, many times I've been told I can't put in for overtime that I'm working. And if you don't like it, find another job. That's very, very common. And that's why, again, we need to have people in power who will not allow that to happen. You need to know what your support staff's being paid. You need to know what your staff writer who's starting is being paid. And like, we were able to get a wonderful gain for support staff or for staff writers that now, previously, it still unfortunately doesn't mean you're guaranteed a script, but if you get a script, that you'll be paid for that script in addition to just your flat salary for being a staff writer, which is, also not an enormous amount of money. That's a huge gain to be able to get, if you're able to get one script in that room and actually be paid a fee for that, that can sustain you for a year or two. It's not like an enormous amount of money, but when you're used to operating on very little, it can be life-changing for that year. And we need to work on that, continuing and getting, we got minimums for staff. We need even higher minimums because of what's happening with, again, support staff being used of if it's 6 or less writers, we got into our contract, you have to have at least, if it's 6 scripts or less, you have to have at least 3 writers. And that's wonderful as a starting point. But also you could be on a show, for example, that I'm on, where there's 3 showrunners, right? So, and talking about inclusion and women, from people of color, women, disabled, etc., you need to have showrunners who are going to say, I need a staff. I need a sizable staff to make the show the best it can be. When I hear of someone on a show, I know on that's an animated show, there's 15 to 20 writers. I've never experienced that remotely in my career. And I've worked on a lot of shows. It's usually been 6 people or less, sometimes 3 writers. And it's very, very difficult to make great storytelling with that few of people. And it also means that there's people who are being exploited that aren't being included in that list. So for example, you work with 2 showrunners and there's no staff, right? They write the show themselves. There's no writing staff. But I would say in almost every case, there will be writer's assistants, script coordinators, showrunner's assistants who are helping uncredited write that show. It's not a no staff situation. It's a no credit staff situation. And these are things that are really important to us. Staff writer, support staff issues, inclusion issues, they're essential to getting more voices to make the best material that we can, where more people are feeling seen and inspired and changed by what they're seeing in front of them, but also as leaders, because I do think that's what's hard, especially in Hollywood or any position of power, is it is sometimes hard for people to speak up, because even if they speak up, you might have one chance, and it's very much like, oh, you're not the fun one in the room because you said maybe that fat joke isn't the best joke we could do, or that joke that I feel is racist is not the best joke we could do, and then people may think of you as well, you're not as fun to have in the room, you're so serious, or these are real things that happen, particularly in comedy rooms a lot, which tend to be also, it's changing, getting better, but still predominantly white men. And so you need to create situations, because we know so many of the things we're most inspired by too are people that had a really diverse and inclusive room of writers contributing to the material that was built, or just to be given the chance at all, like with Monique's show, where it's taking a very specific point of view that's not being represented on television. We need to feel a responsibility to help create those opportunities, but also sometimes to use the power of media to pressure others into doing the right thing and or know what's happening. We've found a lot during the strikes. I'll just take the support staff issue as one thing. Many writers, guild captains, did not understand issues with support staff and or long-term members, because that wasn't their experience. They didn't go through being a support staff person, or they just they had larger rooms most of their career. Mini rooms didn't affect them. And the ones who did were very clear about what the exploitive experience was. So same with issues of inclusion. They're things that only change by us sharing our experiences, and then we also feel less alone, and all of that contributes to power dynamics changing, pressure on the industry of things to change. And so those are definitely goals of ours that we'll be continuing with far beyond the strikes.
I think to add to that as well, what our focus was as we were how do we put our information out there? Stories are undeniable. People are living them. And when you combine them with data, there's so many incredible organizations out there, from the Gina Davis Institute to, we've probably looked at dozens of organizations, and also found where there isn't necessarily institutional support to provide data, which indicates another huge gap in terms of data and representation awareness. But when you have the opportunity to fuse those two things, where you have a member quote of this is my life, and P.S. here's the industry data, no one can at the highest, at the hiring level, can feign ignorance about that anymore. When you combine those two things and you empower them with the information, where it's no, this is unignorable right now. These are the numbers. This is what it translates to, a lived experience of this. We need to do better. And that's on you, hiring person. That's on me putting my story out there unabashedly and allowing people to see me fully, which is the vulnerable part of being an artist. But I think it's true of any hiring application process. And just on that note of vulnerability and putting oneself out there, going back to the question about the ACTRA and IATSE loopholes and things like that, I wanted to stress the importance of like digging into your contract, even as unsexy as it may seem. The beauty of digging into your contract is, you know, what you are and aren't allowed to do. So for instance, SAG actors, which this may be the case for ACTRA as well, SAG actors, if IATSE workers were to go on, sorry, rewinding. When we as writers were on strike, and there might have been writers who had a picket line going in front of the entrance to that set, SAG actors and IATSE members could choose not to cross the picket line, but they had different rules in terms of their specific contract about what they were or were not allowed to do as a show of solidarity. Sometimes you can have a built-in protection that, okay, so you can, if you choose not to cross a line, you'll still have the protection of, you will have your job. So we found with the Teamsters, so the guys and gals who drive the big trucks that carry all the equipment from place to place, it was a very effective strike strategy for us in that if we had a picket line going and we had Teamsters who knew what we were about, they would just sit in their trucks, you know, and wouldn't move. And on certain shows, there were other folks who were like, you know what, I and my family right now really need that paycheck. I respect what you guys are doing, but I really need to cross this line. And that's a personal choice. So again, like it does connect back to values of, if you aren't guaranteed protection within your specific contract, you need to have that soul search of, what are you willing to do? Are you going to respect a picket line, even if it means you might get either a wrist slap or a more serious repercussion? These are within the WGA and SAG contracts. We don't have anything specific protecting us if we choose to respect IATSE's picket lines. Overwhelmingly, though, as soon as the WGA announcement or agreement was released, dozens of people were taking the microphones at meetings saying, how are we going to respect their lines? How are we going to support? Should we put pens down? Is that bad? Should we keep writing our scripts but withhold turning them into executives so that we support them? Like, people were getting really, again, strategic and creative in terms of what's the best way to support, knowing that crew doesn't have work if we don't have scripts to shoot. So therefore, how can we interrupt the pipeline in a way that doesn't cause further damage? And I think fundamentally acknowledging that anytime one of us is on strike or considering it, the ripple effects are real. And oh my God, the IATSE workers, like, they were hurt. They hurt so much during this whole process, and it is awful. And luckily in New York, they were able to apply for unemployment. That wasn't the case for folks in California. So there's a lot of really unsexy detail contract, like state to state stuff or country to country stuff that you do have to dig into, or have your embrace the adorable friend who has done the work so you can figure out how to game the system in those ways, because it is, I would be lying to you if I didn't say like you have to know what your protections are and aren't, and either talk to your guild members about how to get that negotiated into your next contract so that you can observe them, or figure out the creative ways that line up with your values and feel right to you in terms of what your industry needs as a whole. And I don't know, watch Billy Elliot and, you know, get some good strike entertainment going in the background. Remember, you are not alone in this historically or in real time.
And how how we are empowered by being connected. Proud union member of WGA East and SAG-AFTRA here, and understanding and appreciating the value of our power as members of our unions. So
yeah, and
support each other as members.
Whether you're in a union or not, educate yourself about who supports unions, because we know statistically that unions help all workers. They help all of us be able to get better pay and better protections, whether you're in a union or not. Like, for example, the branch of IATSE on the West Coast that does have script coordinators and writers assistants, you know, what they get as a minimum, then often many people are like, well, this is just the minimum now that we're going to pay people union or not. Now that can be good or bad depending what that is amount wise, but it just shows we know statistically like all unions help get better protections for all workers, whether you're in one or not. So it's really important to like pay attention to what politicians support unions and what is your local government doing, what's your state government doing, what's your national government doing to help workers, because worker rights matter. And power to the people, like, is, you know, a thing that people always say, but it's really true. Like, we decide who gets elected, we decide who's our union leadership. So showing up for voting for your union leadership, like things that may seem, you know, disconnected, or maybe you feel like, well, it doesn't matter, but actually it's all connected. And so whether you're in a union or not, like paying attention to what's happening with unions can be helpful for you. And certainly like starting your own union potentially. We've seen that a lot during the strikes on the picket lines. One that started The Kitchen, the TV show The Kitchen, which is like a cooking, you know, show. They started a union for a lot of their workers, and now that's inspiring a lot of other similar Food Network-y cooking type shows to get it going for themselves. And they were inspired by Writers Guild East and other unions. And so it, you know, may seem it's a lot of hard work, but it is possible, and it all is connected.
And that fourth question, Justin, I was hearing Katie say, you know, power to the people, because this does feel like a movement among the people, a different kind of civil rights movement. When we think of the civil rights movement here, how power to the people, the significance of that and how it's carried over until now, and how much that was a part of the labor movement in the United States as well, in the civil rights and with women, including white women. And so there was a question here, Justin, I'd love for you to speak on about the AI. What was the question? AI and cultural in relationship to cultural institutions or their cultural representation. You want to take that last question?
I believe it was one of our most powerful videos. Actually, we at WGA Strike Unite, we attacked this very topic, and as Katie mentioned, it's something that people don't fully grasp about AI is whether in a generative sense, because it is pulling from material that has already been written. And because most of the material that has already been written has been written by cisgendered white men, AI has that focus in the material that it's generating. So as a result, what you're doing is when you rely upon that type of generative material, you are further marginalizing diverse voices. You are marginalizing women. You are marginalizing LGBTQ community. You are marginalizing Black and brown communities. You are marginalizing AAPI. You are marginalizing everyone who is not a cisgendered white male, because the technology is learning from that. They're not getting a lot of the other stuff in there if you just look at it in terms of the numbers. So that's something that we have to really understand moving forward, because if we are going to achieve the levels of diversity in terms of story and storytelling, we want to tell stories that are beautiful, that are diverse in terms of experience, not just in terms of representation, but, you know, what kind of life have you led? How can someone who doesn't look like you relate to your story that you've crafted? And if the material that's being generated is one kind of content from one time and space, it's impossible for you to be able to connect on a human level across the spectrum of different communities. So when we say, you know, power to the people, and we want to rise up, and this is something that's about the rank and file, that's what we mean. Because we are not going to successfully achieve these levels of diversity if we're relying on what's old, if we're relying on what's stale, what was done for 100 years before we realize, before everyone in the industry apparently realized the importance of having a different voice in the room. So that's something to keep in mind with the AI. If they're going to rely on it, it's not going to be it's not going to be something that's fully representative of the diverse communities that everyone has really stated we're ready to hear from.
In a way that there's accountability, so it isn't just lip service, right? Because even, you know, Canada's beautifully expressive and articulate on the celebration of diversity and inclusion. However, you know, we need to, from there to here, from here to there, really see it behind the line, see it above the line, see it in hiring processes, see it in front of the camera, see it in the writer's room, see it in our crews, see it in a way where that's really, we're walking that walk. Also, historically, or people from underrepresented communities may have also had historically unique paths in life to get to this point of directing their film, writing their feature, telling that story, or embodying it, or working on it. And so there's value in the life journey. You know, it's not just the execution. It's not just the asset on the screen. It's honoring, you know, the journeys, you know, the first generation, you know, here, or the daughter of the immigrant, or the, you know, there's rich family history and things. So that's, again, the value system and the culture around this conversation that we need to kind of keep, let's not get numb to it. Let's keep that fresh in our minds. One Canadian film director that I love, especially our Torontonians over there, to look at his work, is Charles Officer. He was a pioneering young, you know, emerging, amazing film director who really spent his career telling stories representing authenticity. And so people like that pioneer the paths that came before us, people that opened the doors and broke the barriers. We need to not only fight for our future stories, but for those who came before us. So look up Charles Officer's work, and I want you to know his work. And if you're inspired by it, as a Canadian and in Toronto, carry it on. And the CBC and there's the Canadian Film Board, NFB. There's so many amazing resources in Toronto alone and across Canada that are just so there and ready to apply to and ready to participate. And I have met TIFF, the Toronto National Film Festival, producers and writers that teamed up in a workshop. The continuing career development in Canada it's really rich. It's really beautiful. So I really encourage you guys to explore those resources.
Yes, and if you were to rely on AI to tell the story of Toronto or to give you some insight, like, they would give you Maple Leafs, God bless them. They would give you the Maple Leafs, and they would give you, maybe a little bit of Blue Jays, but they wouldn't give you Kensington Market.
Or the Kensington Jazz Festival that my sister-in-law programs.
Toronto, like, like, wait a minute, the heart and soul of this place, like, wait. Like, you have to be able to explore those nooks and crannies, because that's where the real stuff is. That's where the passion is. That's where the artistry is. And you can't get that from something that's generative. That has to be felt.
Yeah, and Canada is such a great example of such a diverse country, you know, refugees and people coming from all over the world to live in Canada, and Indigenous folks. And, you know, I look at a show like Sort of, which is one of my favorite shows, a Canadian show, and what that can do for opening up conversations for non-binary folks and people of color and of different ethnicities, and showing what, you know, we're all connected. Like, that show's really about people who are in transitions of different things, right? Like someone who goes through a healthcare scare, and someone whose their marriage is in transition, and someone who's just trying trying to figure out who they are and transitioning with their family of like, I'm a non-binary person and what does that mean for our religion and how my family treats me. But it's also a show that's very grounded in comedy, right? That brings everyone together. It's got a lot of heart and a lot of humor, and yet explores these very rich issues in a way that's very organic. And so then is able to be really like people maybe who they don't know someone who fits into, you know, multiple groups that are represented on the show, but they identify with like, I really like that character, or I really like identify with this aspect of their life, right? And then that might make them think differently about non-binary people or different religions. And it's such a powerful, it just shows like that show to me, obviously one example of, you know, many we could give, but it's a great thing. Like, seek out the kind of stuff that you want to see too, you know, that does exist. We hope to create and build more of it, but support those things, because that's what we know. Like, we know that inclusion and you know, more rich material is what audiences want, but we need to like make sure we seek out and find them and support them too, so that we can get more support to get them made by the studios. Because I saw the question someone sent in of like, you know, do you think the studios care about these issues? There are always some executives and creatives who do care about these issues, and there are many who just care about the bottom dollar more than anything else. So if we show them the power of what storytelling can get audiences to tap into and be excited about, it's then undeniable either way. And we just have to keep, you know, like I said, look at an example like the Our Flag Means Strike fans of just being very vocal that this is content we want and that we want to be made and seen. That has power in itself. That's something that every single one of us can do in what we're choosing to watch and support, and let be known that these are the kind of things we want to see.
Like pictures of ghosts, like Brazil's Pictures of Ghosts.
Yes.
Yeah, actually. Maybe this will be indicated to Academy Awards next year.
It goes back to what Victoria said about marrying that passion, right, with the movement, along with the marrying it to the data. Because I believe a couple months ago we put a WGA Strike Unite put a video out. There was a study that was done, and it proved that inclusive stories actually perform better in the marketplace, period, full stop. Inclusive, diverse stories perform better. They generate more money and they generate more eyeballs. So that's real data. So not only
the mic
it was
dropped.
an article that came out. I know what Justin's speaking about, Hollywood Reporter or some publication, but yeah, it showed stories that have diverse representation. They literally performed higher, make more money, better at the box office. You look at, you know, the Hispanic market, over 50% of consumership is just done by the Latino population, and yet one of the most underrepresented. So we really need to kind of just say, these are the stories we want to tell, and marry that data with continuing to marry that data with the stories, and just keep telling our stories together and doing what we do.
And pressuring leadership to know too, like we also know that women tend to hire more women and people of color and have more inclusive conversations about hiring. And so these are things that we can, you know, remind and encourage.
And like Lilian Regina Pacini, writing, it's in our different fields, we continue this collective conversation. She wrote an article, she's saying about it with her scientific article with her colleagues. So it's a global conversation. You know, it was an interesting 1 hour piece I saw on CNN on AI. There are some good things being done with it. You know, people that are paralyzed are now beginning to be able to walk with the science, but it's got to be a tool that isn't used to replace us with. So hopefully we onward from here.
Amazing. All these conversations is amazing. Madison, do you have like a final question or comment to do? We already we close to the end of this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been really inspiring. And one of the things I do want to note is how valuable I think it is not only to tie your struggles to labor struggles within the entertainment industries, but to tie your labor struggles to people everywhere. And, you know, really value each of you bringing that into the conversation in your answers, but also in your actions. So that's incredibly valuable. And I think the last question I wanted to ask really is that, you know, we're talking about democratizing the picket line, right? Democratizing the voices and ensuring, one of the things that, you know, I'm curious about too, is ensuring that we democratize our unions and pushing for more transparency. And so one of the things that, you know, following the pressure to SAG-AFTRA to release the longer contract rather than just a summary. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that idea of democratizing the union and ensuring transparency from your own union, ensuring that the voices of the rank and file are amplified.
Yeah, and I'll take the chance just to ask you to respond and also make your final words for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will, as a dual SAG and WGA member, we had the side experience of how transparent WGA was, and there was a different style of communication. And I fundamentally believe the more we know, the better we can do, or at least our decisions are more informed. So I think the beautiful thing about transparency within how did the labor movement actually get out, what led to WGA having a 99% approval rating and allowing members the opportunity to ask questions and understand, okay, so that might not have been the gain that we totally wanted, but here's what we're going to have to do internally with as union member to union member to fill that gap until our next negotiation. I think we can learn from that. Any union can learn from that, knowing that, okay, day one of a strike, okay, here's the social media packet. So everybody change your profile picture, everybody post, continue to amplify, use these hashtags, get people in your community to understand and support, do the person-to-person work. The more you can have these very actionable ways of participating and calls of action, or to say, you know what, like that's an outcome that we want. We want to not only achieve a deal, but get one that 99% of our voting members stand behind. How'd they do it? And borrowing from that. And then, you know, so SAG members were able to pressure leadership and say, hey, you know, I know precedent has been, let's not do it, but this is about having more membership that can advocate better for themselves. We want to know what we're saying yes to. We've worked really hard to get to know what this strike has been about. How do we step up into that? That doesn't mean that the negotiating committee has done a bad job. That purely means we want to take on the responsibility of being more empowered. Please help us do that. So I think the snowball effects are always beyond what we can imagine, but I think it does apply to every union, where no one fight will be the same as the other, but there's always something to learn, whether it's how they communicated, how they banded together, like whether it's IATSE talking with the auto workers, because their crew, as soon as they stop, production shuts down. Amazing. You can borrow some tactics there that maybe from the writer's strike wouldn't be as practical or have the same immediacy. So the more we know, beg, borrow, and steal what works. Say thanks for the rest and let it fall. But I think that's the beautiful thing about looking at labor holistically, as opposed to siloing it to one industry or another. Thanks all.
Y dicho caso cerrado. That's a saying in Miami. That's final words.
Yeah, and I'd say, just echoing Victoria, of you know, it's essential to asking questions is not dissent. It's being an informed member and being an engaged member. And we should always encourage that. It's essential to unions growing and gaining better protections and having better understanding. So, for example, like I can love and support our negotiating committee, which I do. And I'd also love to see some lower level writers on the negotiating committee. And those two things can coexist. And I'd love to see more inclusion. And those are good things to bring up, and that we should be encouraging more people to step into their power to say, like, doesn't matter if you're a rank and file member or if you've been in for 30 years or you're on the negotiating committee or you're famous or you're not famous, you all have a voice. That's what's amazing about unions. That's what I love about unions, is that collectively together we make change. And so no one person is more important than anyone else. And that's important for us to remind leadership of too, in any position, whether it's you're a show you're on, or whether it's, the union you're working with. We all need to be engaged and empowered members. It's what makes us stronger and helps us get better gains, because we share more information and stories that simply sometimes people don't have any full understanding of or happening. Or what Victoria pointed out with SAG, of just being informed members. You'd never sign a contract and not know what you were signing, hopefully, right? So you just want to be able to read that for yourself and reach out to others in your life who can give insight, as lawyers or people who have more context working with contracts. It's really important, because you don't want to be taken advantage of, and you want to understand what you're agreeing to. So yeah, please, I'll just leave it with, I really encourage everyone to, try to join a union if you can, but whether you're in one or not, stay informed about unions and support one another, build solidarity, and never be afraid to ask questions, because that can change the trajectory of everyone's lives.
Amazing. Justin, do you have your final words?
Yes. Never let anybody tell you that you're not powerful. I remember during the dog days of the strike, the studios own the trades. So every day, out on the picket lines, we're kind of reading these articles that were clearly planted. And every one of them had the same sort of tone. They were minimizing what we were doing and minimizing the strength of our solidarity, and sort of totally discounting what was so obviously happening out there in the street. And the reason why they tried to do that is they wanted to break us by convincing us that we weren't powerful. And as you see, it didn't work. We understood fully our power. We understood fully the importance of our solidarity. And all it did was strengthen our resolve. And our resolve grew and grew and grew, even when it got difficult, even when the stomach started rumbling and the bills started piling up. We stayed out there, we stayed powerful, and we stayed in solidarity, lockstep with one another. So if I could communicate anything, it's just for everyone who's seeing this, watching this right now, never let anyone tell you that you are not powerful, because you are, and you can accomplish anything when you stand in solidarity to accomplish it.
Amazing. So thank you so much, you folks. I hope we can continue this conversation during next year. We researchers and PhD students in this room, we are totally available to continue this conversation, this kind of coalition between university workers and the internal workers in this holistical aspect. I think this is one of the main learnings of our conversation, all these dimensions, and globally in terms of race, gender, disability, and all these intersectional dimensions of our worker organizing. And yeah, thank you, the audience that who is with us after 2 hours of conversation. Thank you all. Thank you, Madison, for your amazing questions. Keep in touch. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you.
Venceremos.
Venceremos. What of you?
Thank you.